Forsaken finally got its long-awaited update, with the most notable change being a new survivor, Taff. This survivor specializes in placing a variety of traps, helping out other survivors by sabotaging the killer. In this video, I'll be covering its abilities, how to properly use them, then give my ranking of how good it is. I'll also be discussing how you can properly counter him as a killer, since you're gonna see a lot of them after this update. So hit that like button and subscribe, and let's get started. Taff has two different abilities, with his first one being the tripwire. This ability allows you to place a tripwire where you manually place each end of it. It has a 25-second cooldown. When a killer walks into it, they receive slowness 1 for 4 seconds, and they are revealed to all survivors within a 100 stud radius for 8 seconds. I'm not sure why, but sometimes it gives the killer slowness 2 and sometimes it gives them slowness 1. If anyone in the comments knows why this happens, please let me know and I'll include the reason in my pinned comment. It might just be bug though. Over the span of 150 seconds, it progressively gets less visible, making it harder for the killer to see it. After those 150 seconds have passed, it completely disappears and the killer is no longer affected by it. They can kill it using their attacks, which includes projectiles. It has 20 health total, so most things in the game one-shot it. There's no limit to how big you can make the tripwire, however, you cannot have objects intersecting it. Keep in mind you are very slow while placing it, so the killer can punish you if you're being too careless. You can have up to 3 tripwires at a time, meaning you can block off a lot of areas on the map. Whenever you place more than 3, the oldest one will disappear. You cannot place a tripwire within 8 studs of another, however, this still means you can place them pretty closely. His second ability is the Subspace trip mine, which allows him to throw a proximity bomb. It has a cooldown of 40 seconds. After being thrown, it turns transparent, but slightly reveals itself every 13 seconds. I'm not sure of the exact time. It seems to last roughly 45 seconds before exploding by itself. Once the killer is within 16 studs, the Subspace trip mine will explode after half a second. The killer is inflicted with Subspace 3 for 5 seconds and Helpless 1 for 3 seconds. Subspace messes up your screen and causes your camera to move by itself, making it difficult to move properly. This can cause the killer to lose track of you, allowing you to escape. Helpless causes you to not be able to use any of your abilities, so you're essentially unable to damage any survivors during this time. If Taff is within the radius of the explosion, they will also receive the same effects for the same duration, so I do not recommend camping around your own mine. However, this only applies for the Taff that threw the bomb. If another survivor, other Taffs included, or within the radius of the explosion, they will not be affected. If the killer hits a mine before it detonates, it will be triggered and cause a lesser explosion, only inflicting Subspace 1 for 5 seconds and no helplessness. Killers can also activate it in advance using any sort of projectile, so Cool Kid, 1x1x1, and John Doe can counter it pretty well. Cool Kid is in my opinion the best counter since he can throw the projectile so quickly. In terms of his base stats, they are pretty much identical to the noob, except he has 10 less health, being 90. Now that we've gone over all of its stats and abilities, let's go over some tips of how you can use this character to make the killer's experience a nightmare. First of all, when using the tripwire, I'd recommend placing them at choke points. These are areas where the killer is forced to run through in order to reach you. Some examples of this are the cliff area on Glass House, the castle on Brandon Works, the doorways on Horror Hotel, and the mansion on Yorwick's resting place. There are a lot more places, but it would take way too long to list them all. Placing them at these spots allows survivors to run through there, forcing the killer to either focus on killing the tripwire or get afflicted by slowness. Regardless, this will help the survivor escape. Just remember to always have 3 tripwires up at all times and not to go past this amount, since it will cause your past ones to disappear. When placing a tripwire, it's a good idea to try and make the sticks as hidden as possible, since they do not gradually become less visible. For something like Horror Hotel, you can do this by hiding them behind the walls at hallways so they're only visible from one side. This makes it much more difficult for the killer to see your trap, and they'll be more likely to walk into them. That's pretty much everything regarding the tripwires. Now, let's take a look at how to use the Subspace trip mine. There's 2 uses to it: placing it in advance to try and block off a path, or using it mid-chase to help out another survivor. If you place it in advance, it is extremely hard for the killer to spot, especially if it's in a shaded area. But since it only lasts for roughly 45 seconds, it might not still be where you left it if you run back to it looking for safety as you're being chased by a killer. Another way you can use it is to help a survivor mid-chase, playing almost like an Elliot. Toss it nearby the killer and survivor, and if the survivor notices, they can run towards it and either force the killer to take a different path towards them or try and tank the explosion. Best case scenario, you do it in a way that the killer doesn't notice, that way it has a chance to become invisible. Because if they do see it, they can hit the trip mine and the effects will be much lighter. The one issue with Taff is that unless you have some tripwires prepared, he can't do much to defend himself, much like Builderman. While being chased, you may think you can throw the trip mine to stop the killer, but I do not recommend doing this. First of all, you are extremely slow when initially using the ability, which can allow the killer to catch up. And if you throw a mine and try and camp near it, it will inflict you with both helpless and subspace, screwing you over just as much. Therefore, you're either going to have to be really good with your jukes, get help from other survivors, or take full advantage of previously placed tripwires. Now, if you are a killer and dealing with a lobby full of Taffs, which is going to be most lobbies fresh after this update, then this is how you can deal with them. First of all, look out for sticks, since the tripwire itself is difficult to spot. If you do see one, just hit it while you are running and you will break it. This avoids any slowness and doesn't force you to stop. Regarding trip mines, either hit them with a projectile if you see them, or quickly attack them before they explode so you don't get helpless. If you become familiar with the detection range of these bombs, it is possible to juke out these bombs. However, this may allow survivors to gain some distance on you, so it's not always a good idea. However, trip mines are very difficult to spot, so most likely you won't notice if it's placed in advance. You may however get lucky and happen to see one of them fly flash, which they do every 13 seconds. But if it does give you helpless, just try your best to keep pursuing the survivor until helpless runs out, since you don't get any sort of slowness. Since Taff is defenseless without his traps and can cause a lot of annoyance for you, I would recommend targeting them pretty early. I would say Builderman and Elliot should still be your first priority because the sentry is much more impactful and Elias will continuously heal others. In terms of how good Taff is, I'd say they're an A tier, maybe even an S tier if you're really good at them, especially if you're good at juking the killer. The tripwires and Subspace trip mine are great for helping out the rest of the survivors and keeping everyone alive. But with that, that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about the survivor and whether or not you agree with my ranking. Because this video is pretty fresh after the update, there may have been some things I got wrong and some helpful tips that I did not mention, so please let me know in the comments. I think it's going to make being a killer much more annoying, but it's definitely a fun strategic character. Also, big thanks to my boy BokBlocks for helping me record this video. He makes some cool Forsaken videos, so you should check him out. Anyways, hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.